So as Diana mentioned, I'm on the Collective Impact Committee. And so part of our job was to synthesize the information that's coming in from breakouts yesterday. Our overall goal is to try and help ensure these things happen within SZ4D and deal with some of the barriers to interdisciplinary collaboration that came out in the discussion yesterday. So let me get to it. So one of the first things that was asked is sort of what are some of the benefits of interdisciplinary collaboration? So this was not a part that we spent a lot of time on in breakouts, but I wanted to touch on a couple of things that came out. An interesting one I saw was workshops that have a more dedicated interdisciplinarity tends to create exposure to fields that may not be prominent at any individual's institution, right? So that in essence, I saw the term a super department can be sort of formed where you get sort of interactions with a broader set of people, and it really sort of enhances the kind of learning you might do and interactions you might have. There was also a couple of times folks recognized the epistemic strength and diversity, right? The idea that sort of doing interdisciplinary collaborations brings more perspectives to the table, and that that leads to better science. Another one was innovation that creates new ways to solve problems, right? That if we're trying to come up with new ways to solve the science questions, interdisciplinary collaboration can sort of help us with that innovation. The other aspect we saw is workforce development, that if we're trying to sort of ensure that our early career folks have the skills that translate to careers, interdisciplinary collaboration is certainly one of the ways to give them the range of skills that can help them in their career path. There was, interestingly, some discussion about, well, how do we define successful interdisciplinarity? So there was a range of answers to this question when it came up. There was the aspect of, the degree to which we can answer our SZ4D science questions will help us to see how successful our interdisciplinarity has been. And so that's sort of a long-term view of a way to kind of gauge, is it working or not? Another sort of long-term view that we saw was the impact on students and early career folks, right? Are they going to be able to pursue science as a career? Would be one of the ways that we measure that. Another would be whether or not students have the tools to investigate their own questions, so whether or not they develop intellectual curiosity could come out of, whether or not we're achieving as interdisciplinarity. We asked about sort of things that promote and interdisciplinary collaboration and things that are barriers. I'm going to start with the barriers so I can end on a high note with the things that promote it. So some of the barriers were, and this was almost uniform across the breakouts, was just the lack of knowledge of other disciplines, right? So sometimes that's as simple as jargon or acronyms, but a lot of times it was just, I don't feel very comfortable that I don't just know enough about another discipline. So the idea of trying to work with someone from that discipline is hard because, I'm concerned I just don't know enough. There was, of course, also it takes more time to be able to work with folks from outside my discipline. It's easier inside my discipline. And that the more communication is needed to be able to work outside your discipline, right? The sort of information going back and forth needs to be more prominent in an interdisciplinary collaboration. There was some interesting discussion about, to do interdisciplinary collaboration, you need to know who does what and what those tools are capable of. And sometimes you don't even know who can do the thing that you need as a scientist. So sometimes you just don't even know who to ask. We also recognized that there were different data gathering and processing timeframes, right? So how long it takes to deliver on a particular sort of observation or model can be different between different disciplines. And so that can kind of offset the ability to integrate. And then also just the recognition that there are disparate geographic distributions of everyone involved, and just trying to get people together can be difficult. Another one that came up fairly regularly was just the publisher perish, right? I think we should recognize that students are saying this, right? This is not early career faculty that are saying this. This is students. They recognize that they have a short amount of time to produce science to be able to move on to the next step in their career, right? So there's concern that interdisciplinary collaboration takes longer, and are they going to be able to do it in the time frame they need to? There were also some recognitions of the existing competitive mindset, and how to get around that. So, if there's large groups of people with open access to data, there's going to be competition. Also, just a history of colonial practices and the sort of drop-in science, right? And so, trying to work against that at times can be tricky. We also need better mechanisms to incentivize interdisciplinary collaboration. So, people are likely to fall into their old habits if we don't have good incentives. I thought this last one was important too for us looking forward as SZ4D, that funding for interdisciplinary science can be tricky because there are more things that can sink your proposal. This came out in several things, and I think this is really important for us to consider, right? That, we have to shore up all of those different aspects to make sure that that we don't get sunk on something that isn't as developed as the other parts to it, right? But also emphasizing that together, those things are going to give us a better result than something that's proposed individually, right? So trying to make both those cases is important. All right, so then some things that folks recognize as ways to promote interdisciplinary collaboration. So one that came out routinely was this idea of matchmaking within SZ4D. I think in BCG, we have focused a lot on matchmaking outside of SZ4D. So I think there was a clear call to work on matchmaking within SZ4D, trying to help folks to make those connections inside. So things like a directory of people that are involved in SZ4D and what kind of expertise and experience they have could help facilitate collaboration. But another sort of round of discussion came towards, well, just sort of talking about what your project needs are could be actually more important than what you're good at. So trying to sort of envision a bit of a Craigslist for SZ4D. Can someone help me with this? Could be a way to try and help promote this. There was a recognition that a lot of times collaboration happens at meetings, but this sort of ability to do it online may be a way to try and help sort of make some of those in-person meetings even more effective. All right, there's a lot of discussion of education and ways that we could sort of do that better. There's a lot of interest in CIDR, but I think different forms of CIDR were discussed in many ways, right? That a 6-week in-person CIDR can be difficult for a lot of people. And so are there ways that we might do it as shorter or virtual, or things that have lab visits, right? Things that require being in a physical space. So thinking about that. Hackathons and co-development of software was discussed quite a bit. There is still quite a bit of interest in webinars, but I think folks are fairly tired of full virtual meetings. And so thinking about ways to be efficient in the time that we spend together online. In-person meetings were certainly recognized as important, but trying to make them as inclusive as possible, I think is really critical. There's also discussion of field forums in schools. There are ways that can really help to do things when out in the field and exchanging ideas, but time and money are an important aspect there. All right, so a little bit more about things that can promote being clear about things that you don't know about other disciplines. Even there was some discussion of, making folks give talks about things they don't know much about can sort of help reveal some of the things that we need to learn better. Moving the emphasis from sharing your results to helping others understand can be one of the ways that our community can do it. And ways to promote visiting scientists kinds of strategies, right? Where we can have folks visiting for a few weeks to exchange ideas and form collaborations. But it could be small steps too. Just pairing students up to work on a paper together could be really helpful. All right, and then I think this is my last one, that the science questions, they need to be interdisciplinary, not just the groups. We need cross-cultural competency training. We need to incentivize social scientists participating. We need more credit for large author lists, publications in geoscience. It's just not our tradition. So moving in that direction is going to be important. I think I better stop there. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. So now we're going to have about 5 to 10 minutes for you, the audience, to come up and signal boost anything you heard, add specifics, anything you missed. Remember, this is what the committee members heard from the discussions, and they worked overnight to synthesize everything they heard, but now's your chance to add something, correct something, emphasize something. So please come up. We have the 2 mics on either side.
And if I could ask for folks to please make sure to introduce yourself when asking a question. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Kaylee Condit, University of Washington. Mike, thank you. I know this is like the hardest job of the synthesizing all this stuff.
Preparing this meeting was the hardest job. So please
Yes,
make
yes,
sure
yes.
to thank these people.
Once we're here, so yeah. I just wanted to signal boost this idea of sort of reevaluating the structure of rewards in our community and rewarding like different ways of publishing and doing work. As someone who's on the tenure track right now, there are certain things that I know I have to do to get tenure. And so if we can create those incentives as an entire community to promote this interdisciplinary collaboration, we're going to both change our field and the science that we can do, but we're also going to be rewarding people of all perspectives in this realm. So I want to signal boost that. So thank you for putting that out.
Yeah, I'll just add that SZ4D has some power to sort of put out a white paper that says, here are the things that we value as sort of scholarly contributions, because that can help when folks are trying to make those arguments for tenure. So I think there's power here we have.
I think another aspect that came up was discussion about recognizing different levels of work. So publication, data collection, data analysis, and this ties into a little bit what I'll talk about too with systematic, data repositories and making sure that there's a good way of everyone's work at all levels getting recognized there.
I want to myth bust and signal boost. So one, Mike, I saw your comment about how a multidisciplinary proposal is tricky to review. And I hear this all the time. And actually a strong proposal that is multidisciplinary is great. We love co-reviewing stuff. And we've looked at the data of success rates internally at NSF. And if anything, proposals that are shared between multiple programs do better because you have two programs that are interested in it. So I say this a lot. I just want to make sure everybody hears this, that like actually it can be to your benefit. Like if I only have to pay for half a project and something great's going to get done, like financially for my program, that's a good thing. And then about making things like CIDR sort of more inclusive. One thing we talked about in our group that I just want to boost is, there are a lot of mechanisms to provide family support and think building that into how you're planning something that might be weeks long, so that if people need to bring their families or there are many ways that you could make those more accessible. And so I just encourage you to think about that piece of it as you're sort of designing those things that might be place-based.
Jen, one more before we move on to our second synthesis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Winelli. Something that came up in my breakout session, and it's, I think, a smaller part of the interdisciplinary collaboration, but very important, is making sure that the proposals or the things we write have explicit language about paying our grad students, because as a grad student, we are the people that do most of the work and we don't get paid equitably. And so I think it's very important to include that language too in whatever we do. And it's not my idea, it just happened in my session.
Excellent point. We've all been grad students.
Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead. I'm on the wrong side.
Okay. I was going to take one over here and then that one, and then we'll move on to Helen's synthesis.
Something that I just want to point out, Mike, is yes, we all may be very tired of the online meetings, but it is one of the ways that is easiest for this geographical divide to be bridged. And also it's one of the ways to be most equitable when it comes to the early career inclusion and participation and things like this. We as grad students, not getting paid a lot, often don't have the funds to come to meetings like this. And so unless there's an allocation of money that fully supports a graduate student to come to this, those are the people who are going to be excluded from the conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Jade. I appreciate you clarifying that. That was clear across many breakouts that there's a recognition that online opportunities are inclusive, but I'll point out that they are also limiting too, right? So we had far more breakout conversations here in person than we did online, despite we had more people enrolled to sort of be in this meeting online. So there is still a disparity between in person and online, but we need to continue to try and sort of promote ways to make our online meetings more inclusive too.
Okay, one more quick one and then we have to move on.
Sean Gallen, Colorado State University. So one of the things that wasn't up there that I think is really helpful is if we co-locate the arrays and data collection, that it's going to facilitate interdisciplinary collaboration. And that's just naturally going to happen. So I think that's an important thing not to lose sight of.
Great.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to hear a second synopsis from CIPC given by Helen Yanuszewski.
Okay, so I'm tasked with summing up the kind of second half of the conversation that was had yesterday of the two questions we were talking about. And so this first broad topic is translation across sites. So maybe it builds on that last comment that was made. And so how do we make sure we have communication, cooperation, and collaboration across the different scientific sites that we are identifying? And a big part of this conversation was how we build up our human resources to do this. And so really, I want to emphasize that first word in bold there, bilateral. It was very clear across all breakout groups that we need to make sure that this is a two-way conversation about science ideas, about on-the-ground deployments, and about exchange of results and where we go next. And in particular, one comment that stood out to me was making sure that it's not just, us from the US thinking about what we want to do in Chile, but also how Chilean scientists can better inform the science that we do in Alaska and Cascadia and bringing their ideas to the table. So that was just very highly emphasized at all breakout groups. Some more specific ways we can promote human resources, so bilingual strategies, both on the science side of things, as well as outreach products that come out of our science, multimodal workshops, again, building on this theme of making sure there's many ways people can participate, making sure this work is funded, internships, exchanges for students, early career scientists, at all sorts of levels for either short times visiting different institutions or longer periods of time. And then, yeah, as I said, all directions at all the sites. And another thing to mention with this is that SENet was seen as a possible way to facilitate and expand interactions beyond just the US and Chile. The next part of translation across the sites is how we have our data accessible across different sites. So accessibility and standardization of data, raw data, data products, a data portal for interdisciplinary results from subduction zones was an idea that was talked about a lot in different breakout groups. But there's, very different levels at which that could be implemented, from as basic as links to existing publications and data, all the way to, facility with professional support behind it. And the timelines for those might be very different, but recognizing that we need to be doing more in this direction to make our data accessible. And there was also discussion about how this would be different perhaps for digital data versus physical samples. And I don't think we have a final answer on how to do this yet, but it was definitely something that was emphasized as being essential for success in this area. And then modeling. Modeling was seen as a huge way to link these different sites, to link, the observations that we get from different locations with the fundamental physics of what's governing subduction zones. So collaboration between modeling, modelers and observationalists, using model outputs to drive designs of deployments and experiments, and models to drive comparative science questions between the different focus sites. And then also design, making sure that whatever we're doing at these locations, we will have an end product that allows us to robustly compare between our different focus sites. And then facilitating a cohesive whole, making sure everyone is on the same page. So again, with international collaborations, this was a large part of the discussion, making sure that it is built on collaborative relationships from the start, developing research questions and strategies with input from international collaborators from the beginning, having things spelled out in MOUs early on, shared field station and resources that was seen as a way to not only build efficiency in science, but also perhaps get everyone at the same place at the same time to spur on new exciting science discussions. And also making sure that we're engaging with local communities and people that use our science to inform hazard models. And then some of this is what Mike had already touched on. There's a lot of overlap in these different ideas, but making sure again that there are lots of different ways for people to engage at different levels of commitment, making sure that we are moving forward in a way that recognizes contribution at all sorts of levels to the science that we do, proposal writing workshops, more transparency, and then perhaps someone in the room can build more on this, but there was definitely calling out the IODP model across many breakout groups. This is not something I'm familiar with personally, but it came across in several different breakout groups. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Helen. Okay, so we have 7 minutes left. And a request to hear about the IODP model. It sounds like something potentially interesting. So please come up to the mics.
Hi, Gail Christensen, NSF. I can talk about the IODP model because I was the co-chair of the science evaluation panel before I came to NSF. Yeah, so the way IODP works is that there is a selection process. So it's not quite as inclusive as you might think. But after the selection process, it's a team. And that team works together. It's interdisciplinary. And in the first, there's a moratorium period after data acquisition. And during that moratorium period, every paper has everybody as a co-author. And there's a lot of planning along the way, after the data, once you know what you have, there's discussions about who is going to do what and who's going to collaborate. But collaboration is always there, and it's always international as well. So I could answer any other question.
Yeah, Harold Tobin, University of Washington. I could add just a little bit to that. One of the things that's kind of cool in IODP is once there's a project, and so you're going to do a drilling program that's been proposed and vetted, a science party is selected, as Gail was just talking about, from applications. But a project may need a whole bunch of different disciplines involved in it. Let's say you're, so based on things that I've done, fault zone drilling project, but you're drilling through stuff, there's a lot of sediment. Maybe knowing the age of those sediments is important, but no micropaleontologist or paleomagnetist was involved in the process of building up the project. So IODP, the program goes out and seeks those people and really brings them in actively to make sure that the science party is as interdisciplinary as is needed to solve the science questions that are addressed. And there really, truly are, coalitions of 25 or 27 people, plus shore-based scientists who can work on samples, have access to them, and might range from geophysicists to paleontologists to geochemists, to everything that you need to put together that program. And I think there's a possibility of designing some projects in SZ4D that would sort of look like that, where we would say, okay, we really need this discipline. Nobody has proposed to do that. Let's go seek those people out and bring them in. That would be cool.
Comment on this side.
Hi, Luana Haywood, IODP. In addition to augmenting what Harold and Gail said, I wanted to call out a few different features. One is, like Harold mentioned, there are designated quotas, and then you can also kind of think of it as, since the scientists get post-cruise funding that comes directly from IODP. That's also a designated chunk of the post-cruise funding. And then those are designated both with quotas for the number of ECRs and the number of students participating in the cruise research. There's also national breakdowns of however many scientists from which program member offices. And then also, as Harold mentioned, idealized breakdowns for what the disciplinary interests are of the science parties. I think that one of the real strengths of the model is the fact that there is this post-cruise funding. So I think it gives people, especially early career people, a lot of freedom in that this is one of the types of research where early career scientist students can actually hold their own funding in their own right. And then also we have very long-lived common data formats and like data storage systems that are the same from expedition to expedition to expedition. So there's just years of data. And after the moratorium period, that becomes accessible to all. And also I want to point out that there have been historical expeditions in Chile, in Cascadia, in Alaska. So there's a lot of data there already for people that are looking for it.
Thank you. Thanks, IODP folks. We have time for maybe one or two more, maybe shifting gears to another topic. Ivo?
Ivo Fustos from Universidad de Fronteras, Chile. First of all, thank you for the meeting to the steering committee. The organization was very good. We appreciate a lot this opportunity to share the science. And yesterday, we talked a lot about how we can to move to the next step. And one of the first things that we talk is sometimes the science or the research question is not possible without look the field. So we think that some meeting, maybe in Chile, could be very interesting. For example, one place that meets the landscape surface group that all the two groups. So we want for us try to share the opportunity that have a meeting in the south of Chile. Maybe, I don't know, Chaitén, for example, that meet the Chaitén volcano that boosts the observatory, where it's very close to the Villa Santa Lucia landslides, and it's very close to the Chiloé earthquake. So we think that is a big opportunity to create a workshop in field where we can look the information, we can look the process and create together new ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivo. That's a fantastic point and a very gracious invitation, and comes back to the point about bilateral opportunities and thinking about meetings in Chile, Chilean run workshops, how to support those and how to use those opportunities to engage both across the international and the interdisciplinary. So thank you. Okay, let's have one more round of applause for our